True Story Media.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
Before we begin this episode, this one's a bit heavy. It has violence. It has descriptions of sexual assault. It is a pretty heavy one, so if you are sensitive to these topics or have a kid in the room, this is your cue to either skip this episode or switch to headphones. All right, let's start the show. It's March 13th, 1964. It's a little after 3 in the morning when 28-year-old Kitty Genovese leaves her job at a bar in Queens and drives home. The streets are quiet, empty. She pulls into a parking lot near her apartment. She doesn't know it yet, but there is a man in another car that has been following her. His name is Winston Moseley. He's 29, married with 2 kids. On paper, he looks like a normal family guy. But he's out this night hunting for a woman to kill. Kitty parks her car and begins a short walk to her apartment. That's when Moseley steps out of his car with a knife in his hand and trails right behind her. She senses him coming, so she starts walking a little faster. But he catches up with her near a darkened bookstore. And without any hesitation, he drives a hunting knife into her back, twice. Kitty Genovese collapses, screaming, "Oh my God, he stabbed me, help me, help me." The apartment windows above her start flickering on. Curtains start opening. Neighbors look out. One neighbor across the street hears the cries. He later testifies, "It wasn't a scream, it was more of a cry. I got up, I looked out, and across the street was a girl kneeling down, and this fellow was bending over her. And I hollered, 'Hey, get out of here, what are you doing?' It startled Winston Moseley, and he bolts out of there. Meanwhile, Kitty is struggling to get on her feet, and somehow she makes it around the corner, out of sight of those windows. And the people who heard her screaming, they just close the curtains, and they go back to bed. Winston Moseley later said, "I had a feeling that this man would just close his window and go back to sleep." And sure enough, he did. Minutes pass. Kitty is still bleeding, clinging to her life. That's when Moseley returns. This time, no one's there to stop him. He finds her twisting and crying for help, and he resumes his attack. He stabs her again and again. Investigators later counted 12 wounds. When she finally dies, he rapes her. That's when he disappeared into the night. And by the time someone finally called the police, Kitty Genovese was dead. Kitty's murder shocked the world. The story that so many people heard her cries and did nothing became a symbol of indifference. It's studied in criminology and psychology classes even today. But here's what you don't often hear. Winston Moseley didn't just confess to killing Kitty Genovese, he also confessed to killing 2 other women. One of them was Barbara Kralik, a 15-year-old girl murdered in her bedroom. But there's a problem. Another man had already confessed to Barbara Kralik's murder, a teenager named Alvin Mitchell. 2 confessions, 1 crime. Who really killed Barbara Kralik? That's a fascinating question, but this episode isn't really about Barbara Kralik's murder. It's about Alvin Mitchell, the man who later rebranded himself as a minister, a born-again Christian, and it's about the accusations made decades later by the people who knew him best, his own children, who say Alvin Mitchell was not just a murderer, but a monster. I'm Javier Leyva, and this is Pretend. Stories about real people pretending to be someone else. Data brokers, ever heard of them? They track everything you do online, your searches, your browsing history, even your location. And then they sell that profile off, not just to advertisers, but in some reports, to the government too. As an investigative journalist, I'll be honest, I rely on people not using VPNs to do my job. It's how I verify stories and track down con artists. But in my personal life, totally different story. I've done everything I can to digitally disappear. And step one was getting a VPN. Protect your online privacy today by visiting expressvpn.com/pretend. That's expressvpn.com/pretend, and you can get an extra 4 months free. expressvpn.com/pretend. Kitty Genovese's murder is not famous for its brutality, but for the fact that the people who heard her cries did nothing. Her killer, Winston Moseley, was facing the death penalty, and his defense was insanity. He offered prosecutors details about other murders in exchange for immunity. He dangled these confessions in front of the prosecutors in hopes of striking a deal. One of those confessions was for the murder of another girl, a 15-year-old named Barbara Kralik. He said he had snuck into Barbara Kralik's home in Queens, climbed up to the second floor, past her parents' bedroom, and then walked into her room and stabbed her to death. But here's the problem. By the time Moseley confessed to Barbara Kralik's murder, someone else had already confessed to the killing, Alvin Mitchell. 2 confessions to the same crime. 19-year-old Alvin Mitchell told detectives, quote, "I took off the screen to one of the front windows and slid into the house. Without waking anybody, I went upstairs to Barbara's room, and I thought I saw 2 people sleeping in the bed." He said he shook the one that he thought was his girlfriend, but it was Barbara. He told investigators, quote, "I punched her in the face and took out the scissors in my pocket that I had stolen from a school earlier that night. She woke up and started screaming. During the struggle, I stabbed her a few times, and then I ran out of the house through the side door. I jumped into the car and told my friend George Borges, 'Let's get the hell out of here. I just stabbed the girl,' unquote." Mitchell's confession was detailed, too detailed. His friend, George Borges, who was waiting outside in the car, corroborated the story. Alvin Mitchell even did an interview with ABC News confessing to the murder. He said in the TV interview, quote, "Why did I do it? I didn't mean to kill her. I don't remember stabbing her." The reporter asked, "Did you think you'd get caught?" Alvin Mitchell said, "I wanted to tell them from the beginning, but I was scared." The reporter asked, "Do you think you should get punished for it?" He said, "Yes." "What form of punishment?" "I don't know." I was unable to locate this footage in the archives. However, it is documented in court records and in the prosecutor's account of the case from his book called Twisted Confessions. Police arrested Mitchell and charged him with first-degree murder. But in court, Mitchell changed his story. He said that detectives forced a confession, beating him with a phone book until he told them the story they wanted to hear. His lawyers pointed out another problem. In her dying breaths, Barbara Kralik described her attacker as someone who didn't really match Mitchell's appearance. Alvin Mitchell is someone that she had known for years, so she would have recognized him. But a judge ruled that her statement was inadmissible. And then add in Winston Moseley's surprise confession, and the jurors had plenty of questions. The prosecutor's job was to convince all 12 jurors that Alvin Mitchell was guilty without a shadow of a doubt. All Alvin Mitchell's attorney had to do was convince one juror that he was innocent. 1 week after the start of the trial, the jury left the courtroom to begin deliberations. They were deadlocked, 11-1. The judge declared a mistrial. It was a hung jury. So, who really killed Barbara Kralik? Alvin Mitchell or Winston Moseley? Let's just put it this way. If Winston Moseley, Kitty Genovese's killer, wouldn't have confessed to the murder of Barbara Kralik, Alvin Mitchell would have easily sailed to a guilty conviction. So why would Winston Moseley confess to a crime he didn't commit? Well, think about it. Moseley was facing the death sentence. He was trying to make a case for insanity, and Barbara Kralik's murder seemed to fit the bill. But the prosecution wasn't done. They retried Alvin Mitchell's case. This time, he was convicted, not of murder, but of first-degree manslaughter. Alvin Mitchell was sentenced to 13 years in prison. Honestly, I keep going back and forth on this. False confessions are a real thing. I mean, there are many documented cases of innocent people caving under pressure and admitting guilt to something they never did. It is an unusual phenomenon, but is that what's happening here? I don't know. I doubt it, really. But then you have Winston Moseley, a disturbed killer who's into necrophiliac and killed indiscriminately. I mean, Barbara Kralik's murder kind of fits the bill. So, going back to the question, who killed Barbara Kralik? We may never know. But here's what we do know. Alvin Mitchell walked out of prison in 1978. He had served just 13 years in prison for the death of Barbara Kralik. Alvin Mitchell would use the case, the confession, the conviction, the time he spent in prison, as the foundation of his next identity. He called himself a man who was wrongfully convicted, a man saved by God. And with that story, he built a new life. And that's where the real story begins. Here's Pastor Pete Fisk with the Church of Prison, a ministry for the incarcerated in Vermont.
The Church at Prison is a statewide prison ministry. It's a real church. We don't have a building on the outside. We meet inside the prisons. We spend a lot of effort, a lot of dollars on helping them get out and fit back into society, even to the point where we actually own a construction company that I started 10 years ago to employ inmates when they get out to help them get back into the workforce.
This is an organization that believes in second chances. When Alvin Mitchell, now in his 80s, started preaching in prisons, some things just weren't adding up. He told different versions of his story, depending on the audience. Sometimes he said he was on death row. Sometimes he was framed. Folks like Pastor Pete started catching him in lies. What's interesting here is that you came across Alvin Mitchell, who obviously had a criminal history, right? But you meet people with criminal history all the time, right? The people that
I work with them all the time. Some of my best friends.
Exactly.
People
So
that I've known for 20, 30 years.
exactly. So he should be no different than those other guys, right?
He fit in pretty good.
You knew, I guess, about his crimes just from what he was telling you, right?
I only knew what he told me. Most of the people that I work with have owned up to what they did. They've taken responsibility.
When did you start questioning his story?
When his youngest son got a job in the prison that he was a volunteer in, and discovered that his father was a volunteer there, and the kid immediately went to the supervisor and saw to it that Alvin was not allowed to come into the prison anymore.
And this is his own son, right?
Yeah, and we got an email notice just that his security clearance had been lifted. He's not able to come in anymore, with no explanation. And then within a day, I got a email from another son, basically spilled his guts in the email, all about his father.
Do you recall what he wrote?
Yeah, he wrote that he was the son of Alvin, and his father's testimony is all a lie, and that he had molested all of his children while he was a pastor in New York State. And that really caught my interest. I reported it immediately to the church.
The church at prison didn't take the accusations lightly.
They asked me to be the person to investigate.
Pastor Pete traveled to meet with Alvin Mitchell's adult children. And it was pretty compelling to you?
It was probably one of the most difficult things I've ever had to be involved in my life. I have dealt with prisoners and understood what they did. I've heard a lot of horrible stuff that they've done, but I've never sat down face to face really with a victim to that extent.
Alvin Mitchell preached redemption, but inside his home, his children say that he was a predator. When we come back from the break, we are going to talk with one of Alvin Mitchell's daughters. This message is sponsored by Greenlight. I'm the father of 2 teens. I like to call them my 2 little broke friends. And now they're at the stage where they're going out with their friends and actually needing a way to pay for things on their own. And for me, that's not just about convenience. It's actually an opportunity to teach them about money. I wish I would have found Greenlight sooner. That's why I'm so excited I found Greenlight. Greenlight is a debit card and money app made for families. Parents can send money quickly, keep an eye on spending, and kids build confidence while learning real-world money skills. Inside the Greenlight app, kids learn how to save, invest with their parents, and spend wisely through fun, interactive games. And there's even a chores feature. You can set a one-time or recurring chores and tie allowance directly to their work. Honestly, if I had that growing up, maybe I would have been motivated to do more chores. Maybe that's why millions of parents trust and kids love learning about money on Greenlight, the #1 family finance safety app. So don't wait to teach your kids real-world money skills. Start your risk-free Greenlight trial today at greenlight.com/pretend. That's greenlight.com/pretend to get started. Again, greenlight.com/pretend.
He was convicted of murdering Barbara Kralik and was out of prison in 1978. And from that time, he preached that he was on death row and wrongly convicted of murder.
This is Naomi, one of Alvin Mitchell's 6 children.
He used that testimony to get into different prison ministries and to infiltrate different churches. And he had married my mother and had myself and my 5 siblings. When we were being raised, we were abused by him sexually, emotionally, physically, behind my mother's back. And when my mother found out about it, she threw him out and, took our side. They arrested him in New York. When everything came out in New York, I was 19. And I went to the police station and, wrote a statement. And they were planning on charging him. And he left New York. He went to Vermont. We couldn't find him. We couldn't find him until maybe a year or so ago. I wanted criminal charges for him. In New York State, the statute of limitation expires after the age of 28 for the victim. And my youngest sibling is 36.
Naomi says that she wanted criminal charges against her father. But by the time she and her siblings came forward, the statute of limitation in New York had already run out. At the time, victims of sexual abuse had until their 28th birthday to press charges. Naomi is now in her 40s, and her youngest sibling is 36. So too much time had passed. Since then, the laws have changed in New York. Today, prosecutors can bring many child sex abuse cases with no time limits. But that came too late for Naomi and her family.
He left New York State and moved to Vermont. And in Vermont, he joined another church and started doing prison ministries and spun different stories that he was, all of his children were brainwashed by his ex-wife, that he never murdered Barbara Kralik, that he never, just kind of floating through his lies still.
Naomi said that she has reason to believe that Alvin Mitchell, her father, continues to prey on his family, most recently on his grandkids in Vermont.
And I know he hurt my nephews, my sister's kids in Vermont, but they don't want to talk about any of it.
Yeah.
He's been taking advantage and hurting people since he's gotten out of prison. As far as the stories he told my grandparents and my mother when he first met my mother, everything leading up to his life now has been taking advantage of people or hurting people in the worst ways.
Yeah.
But he's never faced anything from it.
Let's get back to Pastor Pete. And at some point, you must have confronted him about this, right?
I confronted him as soon as I got the letter from his son. And he denied it and said that his son was lying about him. He said he had touched one daughter when she was 14. Did she have her clothes on? And he said, yeah, she had jeans on. I mean, that's minimizing to the absolute extreme. What actually happened when that child was 5 years old, he started molesting her up until the age of 12, and she was a mess. She wrote a letter forgiving her father, but not saying for what, which gave him the freedom to say, see, I'm forgiven for that one time that I touched her when she was 14. And then from there, I started meeting with the son, and eventually I communicated with all of the children and the ex-wife. And I confirmed that out of 6 children, 5 had been molested.
Wow. And what would it have been like if you confronted him and he actually said, yes, I did these things?
I would have had a lot of compassion for him. I would have, I don't know. I have compassion for people that have committed crimes and live up to it and admit it.
So what makes Alvin Mitchell different than any of the other sex offenders that Pastor Pete works with in his ministry?
The people that I work with on the outside are always under supervision of the Department of Corrections. They're under heavy supervision. They have very tight restrictions that they can't deviate from.
And he's basically under no supervision whatsoever, right?
He's not under supervision. He's not on any list anywhere. He completely got away with this. You got to realize he has a violent history. He committed a murder that really didn't make sense. Just because a girl was screaming, and he killed her to shut her up instead of escaping and then getting away with it.
That's not an accident, right?
No. And when after he got out of prison, somebody referred to his wife as a and he almost killed the person. He beat him so bad the guy almost died.
So he has a violent streak.
Yeah, he has violence, and in his molestation, it was violent, and it was meant to induce pain, if you want to imagine.
Yeah. That's very disturbing, man. Very disturbing.
Yeah, it is. And if you really look into the characteristics of this man, they're equal to a psychopath.
Yep.
He has no conscience.
Like the way I feel about it is he's at peace. He's totally happy with his life. He's completely at peace. And nobody else is. And that's absolutely unfair. It's why does he get to sit in his own happiness or peaceful, when the rest of us are suffering and worrying about other victims. And I know there's other people out there that he's hurt. I only know about my siblings and my nephews. The last time I saw my father was 23 years ago. And I know in that time, there's got to be more people. And I know until the day he dies, there's going to be more people.
His family wants nothing to do with him. No reconciliation, nothing like that. They don't want anything to do with him. They just want the world to be protected against him.
It's important to note that even though most of his children accused him of sexually abusing them, there have never been any convictions for those crimes. But what does Alvin Mitchell himself have to say about this? That's next, after this break. Tina Wong was a new mother living in Manhattan's Chinatown in the 1980s. Her best friend asked her for help with a project, and all she had to do was accept the package and Tina would get paid. Struggling to make ends meet, she agreed and unknowingly found herself at the center of an international drug smuggling operation. When the feds were tipped off to her involvement, Tina had 2 choices: spend decades in prison or risk her life helping the government bring down the man at the helm. one of New York's most notorious gangsters, no matter the cost. Listen to the Chinatown Sting wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello.
Hi, is this Alvin?
Yeah.
Hey, Alvin, my name's Javier. We've heard Naomi's story, we've heard Pastor Pete's concerns, but I wanted to give Alvin Mitchell the chance to speak for himself. So I reached out to him.
I got an email from you about, did you write an article and I'm in it?
There's been reports that maybe you've been accused of sexually assaulting your children, and that maybe you have owned up to some of it, but not all of it. And so I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk to me.
Where did you hear that from?
One of your daughters.
Okay.
Yeah. Are these accusations that are being made against you by your children, are they true?
One of them is, but not all of them. That's what I've been fighting about. I've been accused of things that I did not do. And that was over 30 years ago, right? You know, I'm 80 years old now. Right? I really, right? I have come to Christ over 30 years ago, right? I reconciled with my daughter. In fact, she wrote a beautiful letter to me, right? And I reconciled with her. Now, what the other ones are trying to do, I do not know.
Why do you think that they would say this if it's not true?
I don't know. I really don't know. That's, and the funny thing is, the one that's probably talking to you is Naomi. But I have talked to her, asked her to forgive me from breaking up the house and everything. Right? I don't know what's going on, but I sent the word out that whatever Naomi is trying to accuse me of, she better be correct, because if she isn't, I'm going to sue her.
What about your son, who discovered that you were working in the jail ministry, and he also...
Oh, yes. I never touched him. I did something stupid with him.
Like what?
Right, and I don't know why. Right, that I told him that I took off my clothes and I told him to take off his clothes. Right, but I never touched him or anything, and I don't know why I even did that. At that time, I was in a bad state. I really was, right? And I was getting caught up in this stuff. And that's, and I wound up turning my life back to Jesus.
Right.
And I don't even have a desire for this no more. And that's what I told my kids. I am not that person any longer. And I am not going to wallow in that any longer.
Yeah.
I'm not going to let Satan keep bringing it up in my face, right? And what I was is what I was. But I know who I am now.
I think what some people, like your children, just want is for you to own up to it, and that's on the record.
But I never did anything to Naomi.
Never? Nothing inappropriate?
No, nothing inappropriate to her.
Yeah. You did mention that that you're not that person anymore, that you don't have those desires. I can't remember exactly the way you phrased it. Do you have those desires? In the past, did you have the desires to have sexual relations with children?
No. I don't know, not with other children. I don't know why I did this to my kids. I really don't. Other children I have no interest in, sexually, right? So I don't even know why.
I want to pause the tape right here because this was quite an admission. Prior to this phone call, Alvin Mitchell only admitted to sexually abusing one of his daughters. Then I got him to admit that he had an inappropriate encounter with one of his sons. And now he admits that he doesn't know why he does this to his kids, plural. Like the Barbara Kralik murder confession, Alvin Mitchell can't help himself. Previously, Alvin Mitchell only somewhat admitted to abusing one of his daughters. He implied that it was only once, and that she was fully dressed. Now, when I ask him about it, his story changed.
Was it more than one time, or was it multiple times?
It was multiple times.
Multiple times.
I don't know how many times.
Yeah.
I asked her, and she said, I really don't know either that.
Yeah.
She says, and she got to the point, listen, right? I know, she says, I don't really want to talk about it because, right, what you did, you did. God forgave you. I forgive you. And I don't want to wallow over the past either, right?
She's had a hard life, right? She's gotten into drugs and all that.
She had a hard life, too. Yeah, she had a hard life. Yeah.
Do you think she had a hard life because of the experience that she had as growing up with you?
It could be. Part of it could be. That's a good question. So, yeah, I probably, guilty of that. Absolutely. I don't have these desires no more, right? All I try to do, right, is do good with people. That's all I'm trying to do. And what she's going to do, she's going to destroy the rest of my ministry, right? Any ministry that I have left, right, she's going to destroy. And you're going to destroy. Right? So keep that in mind.
Wow.
Right? That my ministry, and only because I don't know what she wants from me, right? I have talked to her on the phone several times, right? And I have asked her to forgive me for whatever I have done, right? Because I know I broke up the family, and I feel bad about that. And I always have. They do not understand that somebody becomes a new creature. Anything I have done to them in the past, I have asked them to forgive me.
But maybe,
and
like
so they can do whatever they want. I don't care.
Yeah.
I know who I am in Christ Jesus.
Yeah.
I know who I am. That I am a new creature in Christ Jesus. That everything passed away. I became new. I am not that person, right? If you knew me before I came to Christ, you wouldn't even want to talk to me. I was in a very, very dark place. I did 13 years in prison for a crime I didn't do.
You did do a verbal and a written confession, didn't you, on the Kralik case?
Yeah, I did. After 72 hours in a police station, where they moved me from police station to police station, right, where my lawyer could not catch up with me or my parents, right? I didn't have nothing to eat. What about Winston Moseley, who confessed to it in detail? Mm-hmm. And he confessed to it. It was a serial killer.
When Winston Moseley murdered Kitty Genovese, people heard her screams. They looked out their windows, and then they closed the curtains. They told themselves that someone else would call, someone else would act. Kitty Genovese died because of that silence. And Alvin Mitchell, he survived on silence too. Assuming that Alvin Mitchell killed Barbara Kralik that night, he did the time. But for decades, he told people he had been redeemed, a preacher, a victim of wrongful conviction. But behind closed doors, his own children say that he had been abusing them. They tried to speak up, but the world looked away. The churches gave him a stage, his communities gave him cover, and New York State told his children that it was too late. Just like Kitty Genovese, their cries went unanswered. Now, Alvin Mitchell is nearly 80 years old, still presenting himself as a man of God, still telling his story on his own terms.
I don't know why they have an endeavor against me, right? Other than the fact, right, that the family was broken up. I can understand that being aggravated, but it was 30 years ago. Get over it.
Get over it, he says. He's found Jesus. He's a new man. In Christianity, redemption isn't just about rewriting the past or minimizing what you've done. It's about confession. It's about owning up to the truth. And Alvin Mitchell has never done that. Instead, he's twisted the language of faith into another cover story, a way to hide from accountability while pretending to be saved.
I was ashamed of it, right? But I'm not ashamed any longer because I know I'm a new creature in Christ Jesus. There's a guy named Pastor Pete.
Yeah, tell me about him.
And Josh Riggs. Right? Pastor Pete, I used to do prison ministry with. So they started talking to my kids. And that's when all this started coming back about. Is because of Pastor Pete and Pastor Josh. That's in prison ministry.
Doesn't he work with other sexual offenders who have been...
Oh, of course he does. That's what... He's a hypocrite.
So why you?
Because
why
this
is
happened,
he not forgiving you?
Because they were embarrassed. Because I never told anybody about it because I never was convicted of it. So I was not, I was not going to tell anybody about it. Why should I?
I guess one thing that he would say is that a lot of the sexual offenders that he's working with, are monitored by the state. They're playing by the rules, and you have admitted to violating one of your children, but yet you have no accountability, right? Like the statutes of limitation have passed.
Why would I? I was not convicted of it. Plus, it was 30 years ago, 35 years ago.
Right?
So why would I be monitored by anybody?
Because
I have never had. But this is the point. That's just 30 years ago. I have never done anything like that in the last 30, 35 years. So what's the problem?
Well, the problem is the premise. The premise that you say that you no longer have these urges. I don't believe that there's any evidence to say that those urges just go away with age.
Yeah, you know why people don't believe that? Because they don't believe in Jesus.
Yeah, I think that's what's tough about this story, man, because you haven't been convicted of any sex crimes, right? But you have admitted to it to two different occasions, and you could live anywhere. Like a sexual offender who's been convicted can't live within a certain range of schools. Neighborhoods have to know about them, but you're kind of running around, undetected, and that's, I think, what scares me.
Why would I have to be? This is my beef with you and everybody else. Why would I have to be detected? I was not convicted of a crime. I have not committed anything since then.
But you committed a crime.
All I have to... So then have the cops arrest me.
That's the problem, right? Like, I think your children feel like you got away with it.
I didn't get away with anything. I lost my family. I didn't get away with anything. I lost my children who I love. I lost my wife who I love. Right? I had to start a whole new life. I didn't, right? There is always punishment. I still have, right? I still think about them, right? I'm thrilled to death that my one daughter, right? That me and her, right, are friends again. And I wish I could be friends with my whole family.
Yeah.
So don't tell me that I don't get no punishment.
Why did they call you the monster? Is that true? Like, did they call you the monster? That there was reports that you were part of?
Yeah, they did. Because the game I hung out with, they called me the monster.
Why would they call you that?
Because I would do stupid things. As a kid, did do stupid things.
Yeah, but stupid things and monster. I mean, monster is like somebody.
No, you could play that up as much. You could play that up as much as you want and make it seem, that, right?
No, I just wanted to know.
Yeah, because, right? That's what they called me.
Is it because, I mean, they say it was because you became violent when you would drink. Is that true?
I would become violent when I was drinking. Yeah.
And are you sober now, or do you still drink?
I haven't drank in 30 years. I'm 80 years old.
Yeah.
I'm 80 years old, and my kids are aggravating me, right?
Yeah.
And so, and they got me stressed right out.
I almost never cover stories about child abuse, mainly because it is unpleasant to hear. It almost seems too dark of a crime for this podcast about pretenders and con men. But researching Kitty Genovese's death changed my mind about the story. When Naomi, a listener of the show, reached out to me, I almost passed on the story. But when someone screams for help, do we hear them? Or do we close the window and go back to sleep? Next time on Pretend, we are going to kick off a new series. This one is a doozy. I think you guys are going to like it. I think fans of the LaDonna series and The Stalker are really going to like this one because it's kind of a little mix of the two. That's all I'll say for now. As always, thank you to my Patreon supporters and Pretend Plus supporters on Apple Podcasts. You are the engine that makes this show go. I want to tell you about an event that's coming up that you might be interested. For those of you in or around Raleigh, North Carolina, I am going to be the keynote speaker for an event called Fraud Uncovered. It's put on by a company called Tradewinds, and I will be talking about what you need to do to avoid being the victim of a con artist. It's going to be a great event. It's on October 11th at 11:30 to 1:30, and I will link it in the show notes. If you work for a company and you put on events and you would like me to speak at one of your events about fraud, about deception, about how to protect yourself from bad actors in a digital world and how to digitally disappear, I would be more than happy to come to one of your events. Go to pretendradio.org. There is an events page. You could fill out a form and I will be happy to look into it. My last speaking event was in Dubai, and I spoke to a room full of Emiratis about how I do my investigations and how I use open source intelligence to do my investigations. So if you have an event that you'd like me to speak at, just send me an email at javier@pretendradio.org or go to pretendradio.org and there's more information on that page. Today's episode was written by me, Javier Leiva, and edited by the talented Punith Shenoy with the Podcast Pundits. Our theme music is by Joe Basile with thechicken.net. That's it for today. We'll talk real soon.